Welcome back to The Haunted Beard, everybody. My name is Jake. Thank you once again for joining me. Today, I want to get into my thoughts and breakdown on True Detective Night Country Episode 4. Let's get into this thing. And just getting into some general overall thoughts, I think this was probably my favorite episode yet, as this episode really maintained a very somber, sad, melancholic feel throughout really the entire thing. I really liked the use of the music and the songs here that they played. I thought they just complemented that feel and just complemented the atmosphere of this episode really, really well. It was just very emotionally affecting. And this one, we obviously get into some darker territory than we have so far, with Julia's mental health deteriorating and then ultimately culminating in tragedy being the main event there. But there's just this feeling and sensation from almost all the characters of just being completely and totally alone. There's such this isolated feel. Really, that's been there throughout the entire season, but I think it even stepped it up another notch in this episode, and so I just found that all very effective and very well handled. I also think this episode felt more consequential than last week's episode, where here we do continue to get more character growth and development, but this one too really hones in on the story, and I feel like we get a lot of plot development as well. And then finally, this is the first episode this season where I really feel like it goes into actual horror territory. Not only with the darker subject matter involving Julia and how that plays out, but with the ghostly visions and how they are portrayed. We've seen some ghosts and things like that up until this point in this season, but previously, they're kind of just there to sort of give you this creepy, eerie vibe, whereas here in episode 4, they're genuinely trying to scare you. Now, I want to break down this video in 3 sections. First, I want to talk about some more character developments that I think are worth talking about. First up, let's talk about Navarro, as I can confidently say at this point that she is mentally compromised. I can no longer trust her perspective and her claims. And the moment that, for me, really solidified that was when Julia was in her room at the Lighthouse Hospital, and the orange rolled under the bed. She gets out, looks under, and there is the ghost of what I would assume to be her mom under there. And we obviously know from episode 3 that Navarro had a similar incident with the orange, throwing it out into the darkness and it coming right back to her. And so I think there is a clear connection there now to where I can officially say Navarro is no longer trustworthy in what she is seeing. In addition to that, you have her visions of the now malevolent ghosts, and then where everything culminates at the end, she sees that ghost when her and Danvers go out to the dredge. She's sitting there by the Christmas tree. She's got blood coming out of her ears. And then just the look on her face, she has this 1,000-yard stare. And so the future is not looking too hopeful for Navarro. Now, regarding Danvers here, we don't really learn anything new about her that we didn't know previously, but she continues to really kind of take advantage of Pete's loyalty to her and is really keeping him from his family. And it's quite clear here that she is using him to fill some void that she has in her own heart. Obviously, with the death of her son Holden, I think in some way she is kind of using Pete and her relationship with him to sort of replace that or fill that void in a way. And then the final character I want to talk about is actually Hank, because episode 4 really kind of does a bit of a switcheroo in terms of how Hank is portrayed. Up until this point, he has been somebody who has been really kind of a jerk, somebody that I do not trust and think is shady. And yet in episode 4, he comes across as a little sympathetic. At least that's the way that it seems like they're trying to portray him, as his mail order bride doesn't show up. And you see him at his home and he is just totally alone, seeking some type of connection and relationship, only he doesn't have any. And so I thought that was just kind of an interesting choice to really again, kind of flip that around and portray Hank in a completely different light. So not entirely sure what to make of that. I will say overall, though, I still don't trust him, but I thought that was an interesting choice. Next, I want to talk about some of the major discoveries that happen in episode 4. The first one involves the video of Annie K that she left right before she died. And this leads Navarro and Danvers to go to the school teacher Bryce's home, and he tells him that the item in the background in the ice in Annie's video looks to be like some sort of whale bone or whale fossils. And then he tells him that there is a ice cave system nearby, but that they can't just go out there by themselves because it is extremely dangerous. The next discovery is that Danvers has Pete do some investigating to see if there are any other reports of people who have had similar injuries as the Salal scientists had when they were found in the ice. Turns out he finds a match. This guy by the name of Otis Heiss has some of the same injuries and he's still alive, so they put an APB out on him. It turns out he's actually the guy who mapped the ice cave system. The third discovery is Danvers noticing the issue with the lights. At the very end of Annie K's video, the lights go out, and then she goes back to the video with Clark where there is this power surge and the lights go off. She's trying to figure out why that is and what would cause it, which leads her back to Oliver Tagak, him being the equipment manager at Salal. It leads to her thinking that maybe he had some sort of electrical generator out there. He would be the one who would be in charge of that type of equipment. And so she sends Pete and Navarro back out to the Nomad camp to investigate. But of course, when they arrive, Tagak is gone. Turns out he left the day after that they previously went out there to question him. The big discovery is that Navarro and Pete find a rock in his little home with a spiral on it. And then the final discovery involves someone being spotted out by the dredges, what looks to be Clark, as the person in the photo is wearing the jacket. So of course, Danvers and Navarro go out and into the dredge to find Clark, only it's not Clark. Turns out it is Otis Heiss. And Danvers questions him, asks him where he got the jacket and where Clark is. And he says that Clark went back down to hide. He went to the night country, and we are all in the night country now. A very ominous and creepy scene overall. Thought this was just a very well executed scene. Of course, when they're there, they also see another spiral on some of the equipment there in the dredge. I thought just a great climactic moment to end the episode on. And then the final thing that I want to talk about are just two more things of note. The first thing involves Leah, which is Danvers' stepdaughter. She obviously gets busted for vandalizing one of the mining offices by Kate McKittrick. And this was just interesting because obviously it leads to Leah leaving Danvers' home and going to live with the Pryors, at least temporarily. But this incident brings back Kate McKittrick, who's the owner of the mine, who we haven't seen since episode 2. I thought she would be playing a bit of a bigger role in the story at this point, but she is obviously still involved. We'll kind of see what ends up happening there. The next thing of note involves Danvers driving home and almost hitting the one-eyed polar bear, swerving out of the way. And this got me thinking to where now, are we really going to be able to trust Danvers' perspective and her claims and what she is seeing? Is she now kind of heading down that slippery slope? So being that that happened, and the only other time that happened was in episode 1 with Navarro, who we now know can't really be trusted based on what she is seeing, I now have reason to question Danvers' judgment and her perspective as well. And then the last thing of note, and maybe I'm reading a bit too much into this, let me know what you think, but the last thing I want to talk about is the scene on Christmas morning where Navarro shows up at Danvers' house, they start talking, and she lets Danvers know that Julia killed herself. And she goes to reach for the spiral stone that they found at Tagak's place, but then she tells Danvers that she lost it. And what ended up happening in a previous scene, she goes to Kavix because she's all busted up from getting in the fight. And Kavik asks, what is this? He sees the stone and then sets it down. And I'm almost wondering if Kavik took the stone. I don't know why. I don't know what his motivation would have been. Perhaps I'm reading too much into it and it's just an honest mistake on her part, given the trauma and the insanity of the previous night. It seems like an honest mistake, but I don't know. There was just something about that kind of just grabbed my attention. And yeah, it was the first time I ever really thought about Kavik being involved in some sort of sinister way. But let me know what you guys are thinking there. Then finally, as that scene concludes, it triggers Danvers' memory back to the Wheeler incident where she is certain that Navarro saw something. Only Navarro won't admit it, but we see through the flashback that she sees the ghost of the young murdered woman. Now, I want to conclude just by asking you a few questions, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments. These are the questions that I think are really getting to the central mystery of the show and ones that I'm still trying to figure out. So the first question is, do you still think something supernatural is going on, or do you think that there will be a logical, natural explanation to everything? I'm personally still leaning on the supernatural side. I still think that there are some things going on that cannot be simply explained away just because some people are having some sort of, mental defect or mental deterioration sort of thing. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, that could change depending on what happens in the next episode, but I'm still believing that there is something truly supernatural going on. The next question is, what's with the electrical power surge? And this is something that, to me, kind of still gets me into the supernatural category, to where it doesn't seem like there is just a natural explanation for why these things with the electrical power surges are happening. Obviously, I could be mistaken. Let me know what you think. The third question is simply, what's in the cave? And this is where I think the entity or the supernatural presence resides. The thing that perhaps they unleashed out of the ice. Again, not entirely sure. And then finally, what is the spiral? Is there going to be a very clear connection back to season 1, with it being sort of symbolic of the death cult as it was with season 1? Is that going to continue on here, and we're going to find that there really is this sort of, conspiracy type cult behind everything, and they're the ones responsible for the murders? I'm not entirely sure, but just another question I'm still trying to figure out. Let me know what you think as well. So those are my thoughts and my breakdown on episode 4. Like I said, I really like this episode. I'm really liking the direction that this season is going. And looks like we got 2 episodes left, so hopefully they can wrap this thing up on a strong note. But yeah, hit me up down below. Like I said, let me know your thoughts. Love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. If you got something out of this, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. It's all horror and thriller content on my channel. So yeah, thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.